To preface this video, a little information about my family is that I have a younger brother named Daniel. Daniel is 5 years old and he has autism. Daniel does have developmental issues as he is nonverbal and he does engage in unnormal behaviors. Sensory integrative therapy has been a tactic that occupational therapists have used to help improve the behaviors of these people with disabilities and/or issues. But how do we know these are effective, and is it worth our time? So my question is, how effective is sensory integrated therapy, such as weighted vests and deep pressure, for the engagement of desirable behaviors in children with disorders and developmental issues? So here to the right is a list of the references that I'll be using throughout my research. To restate my research question, it shows how effective is sensory integrated therapy such as weighted vests and deep pressure for the engagement of desirable behaviors in children with disorders and developmental issues. The inclusion and exclusion criteria that I'm using shows that sensory integrative therapy is based on the proposition that functional performance deficits in individuals result from a failure to appropriately process sensory information. The first article to my left is by Carter and Stevenson, which is a study suggesting that there is an increase in desirable behaviors, but the sensory objects seem to be more useful with other strategies, meaning that the sensory integrative therapy was not as beneficial on its own. Rather, it was more beneficial when used with other strategies. Of the 20 students that used the vests, only 5 reported to reduce stereotypical behavior. In my second reference by Case Smith, we'll go over that one here. This one shows some improvement with increased self-care and social function, and it does show positive effects on individual goals, but additional studies were needed with larger samples. So it did show some sensory processing problems, and it also, if you look here, also influenced a child's functional performance in their daily activities. So the use of SIT helped them function better with eating, sleeping, their daily routines, including bath time and bedtime behaviors. So this one was really interesting because it showed many positive effects. My next one here is by Davis and some of her colleagues, which is going to be here. This one was a study of a young boy who had autism, who had expressed some forms of aggression by biting himself. This behavior can cause interruptions of functional engagement. So what happened was he was put into a weighted vest. However, it didn't show any significant effects on his behavior. It actually showed that he was engaging in more challenging behaviors. So this article is interesting because it shows some of the negative effects of SIT, sensory integrative therapy. So if you look here, some proponents of weighted vests, so people who are for weighted vest, they show that the initial placement of the vest can be very crucial to the calming effects. So if the vest was not placed properly, it can actually backfire into negative effects. So on the right here on my list, you'll see 2 that are highlighted. Those are the 2 that I'm not sure I'll be using. So we'll skip over those for now, and we'll go to this next one by Lynn. So we're going to go there. In this study, it was based off of children with ADHD. In this study, they took a large sample of subjects. However, only 110 children were able to complete the study. The other children were actually taking medication, and they had opted out to not taking it, to not taking it. so they were disqualified from the study. So what happened was the researchers added 10% of the subject's body weight to the vest, and they put them in these vests. And it did show that there was great improvement with off-task behaviors, such as fidgeting, being out of their seat, and actually paying attention. And this was in a classroom setting, which is very beneficial for developmental and behavioral issues. So this one was a great study to show that. We'll go ahead and skip down to these next two. These next two are by the same researchers. However, the second one was an add-on, I believe, to their first study. So what we'll do is we'll skip over to the first one right here by Brian and the colleagues. This is the brief report. So in their brief report, it basically showed that there was no significant or insignificant behavior changes while wearing the vest. The purpose of this report was to try and broaden the information, to expand the research of pressure vests. However, if you look here, it shows that the study did not support that it was increasing engagement or decreasing the problem. So it was kind of a neutral study. One did not outweigh the other, which I believe brings into their next study here. In this one, like I said, same researchers. The study showed that there was an increase in problem behaviors while wearing the vest, but there were no differences between wearing or not wearing it. So again, they weren't able to repeat the behaviors, which is kind of hard within all of this research. It's hard to say whether or not it's effective because they can't repeat what has gone on. Some data does show that there was an increase in problem behaviors, like I said. Right here it shows Tommy was wearing a weighted vest, and he showed, like the last study, an increase, so showing that it may be making them more aggressive or pay less attention and not like that they have to wear that vest. So we'll skip down to this next one, which is Schaaf, and we'll go there. Let's see. This one was very interesting because it actually shows the test that is used to measure their behavior, which is called SIPT. SIPT is Sensory Integration and Praxis Tests. And what it does is it assesses sensory integration in children 4 to 8 years old. It helps confirm the child has deficits in their sensory processing, and there's 5 points of criteria within the test. In this study, there was a young boy who had a sensory processing deficit, and by using sensory integrative therapy, 4 out of the 5 points showed improvements. So this is really great because it does show that sensory integrative therapy is beneficial to behavior. We're going to go ahead and skip over this one again because that is for, I'm not sure if I'm going to be using it, so we'll skip over to the next one, which is by Vandenberg. In this one, it showed that the children, in this case, were already doing occupational therapy, and they were taken into this case to see if sensory integrative therapy would be effective. Some of these children were actually taking medications in combination while others were not. Specifically, the ones who were not went from spending time on task at 54% to a mean of 79%. So that's a positive of over 20%, showing that the vests were actually working, which is great. The next one is by Renee Watling, which is here. In her study, it did show that there were significant improvements in individualized goals, such as improved sleep, decreased autism mannerisms, and reduced caregiver burden, whether that be a nanny, the parents, a teacher. It did show that the wearing of the vests did help with their behaviors and being calm. It did show that there was engagement, or there was less engagement in undesired behavior. So again, that's great. However, showing down here, it does state that they were, again, not able to, they were unable to repeat the results, so it was very unclear of their findings. And the last one here is the sensory-based intervention for children, which is right here. This one shows that SIT has that one suggests that tactile stimulation shows the best clinical evidence for reduction of problem behaviors. So we'll scroll up to it. And it does show that, where did it go? I'm sorry, 1 second. That the weighted vests demonstrated improved behaviors and reductions in stereotypic behaviors such as off-task or inattention, and improvement in verbal stereotype behaviors had occurred. So the last two articles that I may or may not add are the one from Liu and Watkins. So the first one here we'll go back to, and this one shows that SIT has neurological links to development of a person's arousal, which can contribute to cognitive function, thus showing this could affect sensory and desirable behaviors if it's off. However, the study did show, if we look down here, that the vests were not useful in toddlers. It's actually the mother's interaction and participation that influences the child's participation and their behaviors. The last article that I may not add in is this one here by Watkins. This study did not show any significant data for positive effects. However, it shows that the vest may not have been worn for a good amount of time, which just proves that the administration of sensory integrative therapy was not sufficient enough, which means that the child may not have been watched properly. He could have been trying to take off the vest. He may have not worn it for the right amount of time. However, this study shows that by wearing the vest, it didn't necessarily fix behavior, but it fixed their repetition. So a lot of children, for example, who have autism, they love repetition, such as turning on and off lights, jumping up and down. So the vest helped with those types of mannerisms, but not actually having a positive effect on their behavior.